Sterilization and autoclaves. We're going to talk about both of those today on New to Piercing, episode number 11. For those that are new to the channel, welcome to the Body Piercing and Tattooing channel. Hope you enjoying the videos. Hope you find them helpful and useful, but you might not know who I am if this is your first time. And if it is, great to see you. My name is DaVo. I am a professional body piercer and have been since 1994. I own and I operate the Axiom Body Piercing studio located right here in Des Moines, Iowa, inside Skin Kitchen Tattoo. So what we're going to talk about today is what is sterilization, what does that mean, and what are autoclaves, and why that's important in piercing. I think a lot of people have misconceptions about what those terms mean and what they do and et cetera. And this is just kind of give you an overview of what those two things are. First off, let's ask a question. What does sterilize mean, or sterile? Sterile means that that whatever the item is, it is devoid of microorganisms or germs, pathogens, things you don't want. Usually these can be kept in either a pouch for a period of time, and as long as the pouch isn't broken or it hasn't expired, it will still, once you open it, that thing that's in there is still sterile. There's the other method of without a pouch, where it's done open immediately and then used immediately. So both of those cases, whatever that thing is, that item is devoid of microorganisms, which is a good thing. Next one is, why is this important? I mean, why should we care, right? It's important because we don't want to introduce foreign pathogens, microorganisms, fungi, etc., into an open wound and cause an infection. We also don't want to introduce a foreign virus that could cause lifelong health issues like hepatitis, HIV, etc. So we want to ensure that whatever product we're using, or tool or item, jewelry, piercing needles, etc., is devoid of those things. It's also important because it is protecting the person who's actually doing the piercing. It is limiting their exposure to any type of pathogens that may have been introduced onto that tool or on that item beforehand. So if they have a cut on their hand and they touch it, that kind of a situation. So it's for their protection too. What should be sterilized? Everything. Now, anything that's going to come in contact with the wound, with the piercing itself, or the piercing area, tools including things like needles, guide pins, forceps, hemostats, jewelry, and all the single-use items, things like gauze and etc. They all need to be sterilized beforehand, or at least come in a single-use, pre-sterilized situation. What's the difference between sterilized and disinfected? When we sterilize something, we are completely eliminating the microorganisms. We are obliterating them. They are goodbye, no more. It's germicide, basically. It's the end of worlds for them. Disinfecting reduces the amount of microorganisms that are on that particular item. It does not completely kill them, but it will reduce them. It doesn't kill off the spores, which is they create this hard shell around themselves and then come out. So the good disinfectants will actually continue to kill even the ones that are in the spores for a period of time afterwards. And we'll get a little bit into that later on. So, difference? Sterile? No microorganisms. Disinfected? Minimal, less. But if those spores are dormant, it can't guarantee those are killed off. Sterilization will kill off the spores too, which basically the microorganism creates this hard shell around itself. Kind of like what I always think about is, remember those whirly-pilly or pill bugs that kind of go in that shell? Kind of like that, I guess. Can I sterilize things at home? No, you can't. Yes and no. Technically, if you got the high temperature or the temperature up enough and created as hostile of an environment as possible, you could possibly kill off those spores. But the problem is consistency. You can't get the same consistency at home that you could get with a high-grade autoclave, something that is designed to do that. I mean, basically, and we'll get into this later, what exactly an autoclave does, but it is kind of like a pressure cooker. So technically, maybe you could, or maybe boiling the items, but the problem is then once you remove them, whether or not they stay sterile or not. The other thing with single-use stuff is you're not in an environment where you can control what comes in contact with those sterile items. It's not as clean. Most people's homes, no matter how much of a clean freak you are not going to be as clean as the studio is going to be. The other big thing is there's no way to verify that it in fact worked. With autoclaves, we test them on a regular basis, what's called spore testing. We send them off to a third party, and they verify whether or not the spores are being killed or not, and whether or not the autoclave is operating correctly. At home, you're not going to be able to do that. I guess you could try, but I'm not sure exactly how you would do that. Also, each individual pouch is going to have an indicator on it, or we use indicator strips to verify that it did actually do the cycle correctly, meaning it brought it up to the correct temperature and pressure and kept it there. Can you sterilize with liquid? No, you can't. You can disinfect with liquid, but you cannot sterilize. It's not powerful enough in most cases to destroy the spores. They will still be there, and if you introduce those into a wound and the spore turns into it hatches, basically. Hospital-grade disinfectants, such as Kafkocide and et cetera, or germicidal type stuff, will kill most microorganisms. However, they do also stay in contact with the area for a longer period of time. So as those spores open up, it'll kill them immediately. It's not like an autoclave where it kills the spores, everything. There's still that possibility. But with hard surfaces, when you're applying them, usually not a problem. However, if you take that hard surface, like let's say a piece of jewelry, and then insert it into a body, first off, the chemicals are not supposed to be in there, and it's probably going to cause problems, which I guess you're probably going to rinse it off anyway, so it really kind of negates itself. You cannot liquefy sterile. Now, in a piercing setting, one of the things we will do here is we soak in Kafkocide overnight, because that is probably going to kill off most of the microorganisms, and when the spores hatch, whatever. And that's for our protection, so that when we're handling the jewelry and reprocessing it, we don't get contaminated. What are the common ways of sterilization, or the most common ones, or what we generally use? They are steam, radiation, ethanol oxide gas, vaporized hydrogen peroxide, ultraviolet, which is kind of a newer one, but it does work really well with certain things, especially liquids, and dry heat. Now, most of these things, the most commonly used are going to be more of the gas or chemical-based ones, and steam. Steam probably, in most studios, that's what they're going to be using is steam autoclaves. How does an autoclave work? First off, there's two kind of things that we do differently from piercing to piercing. There are the items that we're going to store and use in the future. Those are sealed in airtight pouches, and with their own indicators, separate thing. That's what most commonly, when you see people unwrapping stuff, that's what they're doing. They've already autoclaved it. They're pulling it out of sterile packages. The other method is to put it in a container with an indicator tab or strip, and loosely, it's loose, and then autoclave it on there for immediate use. That means that as soon as they get done sterilizing it, they're using it. First thing it does, once you get all those things in there and sealed up the chamber, it will force steam into the chamber or cartridge, or cassette. That's what I was going for, cassette. Increasing the temperature to anywhere, as I mentioned earlier, 121 and about 140 Celsius. And then slowly building up pressure to a point of where it's pretty much a vacuum. It's pretty much sucked all the normal air out of there. It creates an extremely hostile environment that most organisms could not survive. And I say most because we never know anything, if anything, is 100%, but autoclaves are pretty darn close. Then it holds that temperature and pressure at a set period of time. Depending on the cycle that it's using, it can be anywhere from unwrapped 3.5 minutes to 5 minutes, all the way up to, on some autoclaves, it's a full 10 or 15 minutes, just basically because of the style of autoclave and how it works, the efficiency of it. Some of them are more efficient than others, and the price varies. And yeah, you get what you pay for, like everything in life. Then the autoclave will release that pressure and begin to cool down. Some of them have a drying cycle where it'll force hot air into the area to dry off the packaging, that sort of thing. Then they're basically sterile and ready to use, if stored correctly, which is important too. How's it used in piercing? Why do we need an autoclave? Well, it's because of a couple different things. We use a lot of tools in items that come in contact with an open wound. We also can use these on multiple people in some cases. It really varies. Some studios, very expensive studios, have single-use tools where they immediately dispose of everything as medical waste. Other ones will recycle, reuse, I guess. Me, personally, I've been reusing tools since the beginning. It's going to take some convincing for me to start throwing things away. And I've done a whole pros and cons video on this if you want to watch it. Basically, we need to ensure that those items, especially the ones that are going to come in direct contact with blood and et cetera, have been completely, they've been cleaned to the point where they're completely devoid of any microorganisms, because we do not want to introduce those. Now, a situation where if we just stored them in an open container, but they're brand new, right? They're not going to, airborne pathogens will attach themselves. There's also the possibility that an error is made in cross-contamination prevention and somebody touches something they shouldn't and then touches something else, and unaware to them, they have transferred that pathogen to a bunch of needles or a bunch of jewelry. Basically, there's kind of two things I mentioned earlier. There's those that we basically sterilize and then store, and then there's those that we use loosely and we use immediately for the piercing. Really common jewelry, especially we anodize it, change the color, or we're low in stock, or maybe we don't have that particular piece, or maybe we only have one of those pieces. We will do the loose sterilization, the unpouched or unwrapped, as it's called, just for that, and then take it out, put it right on the tray. I guess I should mention indicators. Indicators are a chemical reactive. It's either on the pouch itself, which I guess I could show you when I have one sitting here. And there's instructions on these. I don't know how well you're able to see this, but see those two arrows right there? One of those is for chemical and one of those is for steam. And they will change once they've hit the process and it's gone through the whole cycle, usually to black. The other type are the indicators we have. They're little plastic things. It has a pass or fail. So it basically, as long as it's in the pass section, that means that it has gone through the cycle correctly. Now, other items that we use, like needles, pretty much in this day and age, all come pre-sterilized, a majority of them. Things like cod tip applicators, gauze, markers, etc. All that stuff is sold to us sterile in single use. Basically, the manufacturer will mass sterilize these, usually using some type of gas or radiation to do so. So basically, with those, we don't do them in-house. Usually in-house, it's more tools and jewelry. That's the two main things. The other thing is that we also send out monthly spore tests to verify that the autoclave is working correctly. And these are sent, we run a cycle, and they're sent to, with a control to that laboratory. They do a test on it to make sure there's no spores in there, which means the autoclave is doing what it's supposed to do, and that's to verify that it's working correctly. Some of the more high-end autoclaves, like the one we have, the Stanum style, they have like printouts that come out for every single one. We're emailed or it's stored on a server. There's a lot of information that we do to verify that that autoclave is working correctly. How can you tell whether or not your piercer is using that autoclave correctly or using it at all? First thing, of course, is indicators that I just showed you. a little while ago. If those indicators aren't turning the correct color, no. The other thing is watching them actually doing it and asking to see the indicator. If you're getting jewelry and it's being sterilized separate, asking to see that indicator once the cycle is done. That is your best two options. Also, you can always ask for their spore test results. Here's a few questions that I get often about sterilization. If the piercing is healed, do you need sterile jewelry? Yes and no. First thing I always try to put into people's minds is, even though it's in a sealed package, it doesn't necessarily mean it's sterile. It doesn't even mean it's clean. You don't know whether or not the person that put that in there, that piece of jewelry in that package, washed their hands the last time they went to the bathroom, or whether or not they touched the doorknob on the men's room or what have you before they picked up that piece of jewelry and put it in that bag. There is no way of knowing that. Now, you would say in a healed piercing that shouldn't make any difference, but occasionally, especially in those piercings that are fairly new, like less than a couple years old, you can break that piercing tunnel and cause a little bit of an open, a tear, or what have you, and then you're introducing a foreign pathogen. So it's always best to, whenever changing jewelry out, your best option is always to use sterile jewelry. If it's sterile, do I have to worry about contaminating it? Yes. Wash your hands. Set up a clean place to put that stuff. When it comes to changing jewelry at home, one of the things I always suggest doing is, especially if you just buy a cookie tray to do this, or a cooking sheet, one that has the sides, so it's kind of so there's a ridge or a wall around it. You can just buy a separate one that you use. They're like $10. And then disinfect it, put down saran wrap and then paper towels, and then that's what you use to set up to do your piercing or change your jewelry. That way you can put it over the sink and not worry about it falling down the drain, which is the plumbing systems in the world are full of body piercing jewelry ends. I swear to God, because that's where it commonly falls. Either there or in the shower, or halfway through the shower with soap in your eyes. Anyway, yes, just because it's sterile doesn't mean you shouldn't wash your hands, clean up the area, make sure that it doesn't come in contact with anything else that may be contaminated. Can I just clean it with rubbing alcohol or peroxide or Bactine and then it's sterile? Yes and no. As we already went back before, it's a disinfectant. The problem with disinfectants is then you're introducing it into the piercing, and that can cause some problems too. But the other thing is that it doesn't kill off the spores. So if there's spores, you put it in there, and there's a tear in the piercing, and the spore opens, and infection, yay, and that healed piercing. So yes, it's good at cleaning off stuff, but for the most part, it's not going to really be that effective enough to make a real difference. Can I autoclave my best friend's jewelry and put it in me? Yes and no. It's one of those things where if it's cleaned, and that's usually involves an ultrasonic, and then re-sterilize, there's a limited possibility of problems. But the problem with used jewelry is not just that it is contaminated, but also probably during the wearing process there may have been scratches or indentations or something made by the person who's wearing it, and that can cause issues, especially in a fresh piercing. The other thing is it there is a level of DNA that always stays on objects. They've learned, and I'm sure I guess it'd be kind of neat to carry around a little bit of your best friend or loved one with you everywhere you went. But especially in a fresh piercing, I really don't advise it at all. Last one is probably the most common one. Does the jewelry need to be re-sterilized over time? No. As long as it's only in you, as long as you're the only one having contact with it, and as long as it's in good repair, it doesn't need to be sterilized. A situation where you may take it out and have it ran through an ultrasonic tank to clean it, then it should probably be sterilized. If it's been sitting around in an open container or with other jewelry for a long period of time, it should probably be sterilized before you put it in, especially if the piercing's fairly new. Well, that's it. Did I answer all your questions? Do you have other ones? Leave a comment. Till next time, here's hoping all your piercings heal with ease and without a single issue. And if you're in the Des Moines, Iowa area, I would love to see you for your piercing needs in the future. Have a good day, everybody. Take care, and we'll see you in the next video.